Hello and welcome back to the Open Resorcery. It's Devi and I am joined today with Twisted.
Yo,
And we are going to be talking about ritual just as a whole. So I want to start out and ask you first, what does ritual mean to you?
okay. Well, in terms of that, before I get into actually speaking on it, I will say if there's any sort of extra noise coming from my end, just be forewarned. The time of the recording, morning time, things are shifting, things are moving around inside the home as well as outside. That said, in regards to ritual as a whole, right? Rituals. Um, we could talk about hey, look, you're going ahead and doing a patternistic action that in fact has meaning, what have you, and all of that sort of thing. Um, pretty much, that sort of manner of we're doing something procedurally that has a particular meaning in order for, you know, us to go ahead and have a semblance of normality and or just keyword of the term meaning, bringing meaning to things, what have you, and at least in a very modern interpretation where everything is senseless and doesn't necessarily have a particular purpose, or at least that is what is tried to be portrayed, and a lot of people have lost a sense of that, but it's not necessarily the case.
Mhm.
There is a reason, there's understanding behind things, but that reason doesn't necessarily mean it's scientifically or materially quantifiable. There's a higher, less tangible sort of reason and logic that plays into it. And, while we may not necessarily completely understand it in our conscious minds all the time, and maybe not everybody is aware as to what it is all about, or we don't have it figured out 100%, these sorts of things go ahead and provide meaning to our everyday lives and what have you, or the different things that we do within them. What say you?
So I take it in terms of rituals in terms of like traditions and things like that. Um I see that as an easy way to allow yourself to kind of go with the pattern that has been set and allow the intention of the ritual itself to bypass the front of the mind and sink further back because you are in the actions, you're in the doing, you are in the moment. You're not necessarily fully in that thinking mind, that overthinking mind where you are just constantly evaluating, reevaluating, reevaluating. You are allowing that to sink through those filters and into the subconscious where things actually can occur. At least
Oh
that is what
yes,
ritual is to me.
oh
Um,
yes. Well, I think that in terms of you asking me on the spot, you know, um, while your particular definition and all that sort of thing, which is rituals and kind of seeing them as performance art in a sense, and
mhm.
or just tapping into those innate sort of things, that innate sort of meaning, right? Like before we went ahead and hopped in this conversation, we were on that same sort of thing, but I guess I went ahead and instead of talking about ritual in the sense of a particular all right, I'm going to go ahead and for example do an LBRP, right? And or do some sort of magical sort of thing. I was just thinking about any sort of action within our day-to-day lives, and more so
Mhm.
of a expanded sort of thing that
Mhm.
we may not necessarily consciously identify as ritual, as opposed to more so conscious identifier of a ritual, as in all right, we're going ahead and performing magic for whatever particular purpose of connecting to the higher, what have you, or we're going to manifest something or something like that. So I think that's more so along the lines of even though we worded it differently, that they're both within the same sort of
Oh,
thing.
absolutely.
It's just one was more so focused in terms of yours. One mine is more so of a grandiose or just
Broad
overarching
spectrum.
sort of thing.
That
Yes.
one's more broad spectrum. And honestly,
Yeah.
even and I'm going to kind of get into this in a little bit, but even the everyday tasks of like washing your dishes, that can
Yes.
be a ritual. And what that can communicate to your subconscious is that I am taken care of. Everything is within my power in my space. I am taken care of. But you would have to really set that intention first, because I know a lot of us can really get bad with chores and it's just like, oh, but I don't want to do it. And then it gets into becoming more of a task rather than a ritual. But ritualize your life. Oh my gosh. Ritualize the entire thing. Ritualize making your bed. Ritualize taking a bath. Ritualize everything, because that care and that living life with intention makes everything mean so much more, and it brings so much more fulfillment. And I know that's a very difficult thing to do, because we get caught in the day to day, right? We get caught in the mundane, the small and the seemingly meaningless, but it's not.
Oh
It,
yes.
there is nothing about existence that is meaningless overall. But in terms of ritual in magic, I wanted to more so go into rituals inside of
Oh
magical
yes.
practice overall. Um, I was more along the thought pattern where rituals are the way that we are able to make the ego stand still or stand aside. We are giving in to the magic itself. We are giving in and surrendering to those moments and surrendering to the act in and of itself, whatever that act is, and allowing those intentions for your magic, for the universe, for whatever you're doing, to actually sink in and hit the battery pack, instead of just kind of float around in your really hard to get out of thought space.
Oh yes. And you know what? In that sort of sense, I do want to, like, actually touch on a key point and present more so of a notion of the conscious mind and the ego, all different parts of the psyche that make up that conscious mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
That in of itself, right? While a lot of the thought processes and sort of things that are associated with it we consider as normal, right? And our human everyday to day experience living in, at least for both you and I, a modern, Western, civilized society and all that sort of thing, in regards to like the actual manner of existence as a whole, right? It's not necessarily normal, it's more so abnormal in terms of being in the flow and currents of everything else, working more so off impulse, instinct, intuition, what have you. And when you go ahead and you participate in rituals in the sense of, allowing yourself to like go ahead and be immersed in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's more so in a seemingly paradoxical way. You're going ahead and behaving more so naturally and by being more so eccentric in terms of whether it's ceremonial, traditional Western magic, or say, anything of Eastern sort, and or like shamanic sort of rites and rituals, which is more so. Those are usually more so along the lines of like, I guess you could say if ceremonial magic is, you know, more so civilized, quote unquote, sophisticated, or what have you, formalized. That's more so raw, rugged, primitive, in the shamanic sort of manner, and or like druidry or anything of that nature, right? But you're going ahead and allowing for that eccentric sort of behavior that you're going ahead and doing, whether it's the formalized pageantry or the more so just like letting go and just behaving more so bombastically, which is not necessarily a bad thing, you know, but that is more so normal in the actual manner of things, not just our humanistic sort of like societally based and a lot of times materialistic viewpoint of things. So it may seem paradoxical, it may seem like counterintuitive, but truth be told, it's actually more so intuitive in the actual manner it is. It's actually delving into the intuition itself. So you know,
Absolutely.
uh, yes.
So in that, you know, the kinds of rituals that maybe would come to mind is, you're seeing a magician of sorts at their altar, right? You're seeing them doing something and it's just one instrument after the next and they're into it and it's almost like they're in a trance. They are in that moment, they are in themselves. The words are flowing off of their tongue. They're not consciously thinking in a sense because they are there. They are present wholly and completely. Now, it may seem very silly to look at from the outside, like watching somebody lose themselves in a dance. And you're just like, where did you go? Because you're literally seeing them disappear just out of that thinking mind. They don't care who's watching. It's like watching somebody just go nuts and dance however they want to dance on the floor. They may not have rhythm to save their life, but they are enjoying that moment and they don't care who's watching. That in itself is ritual because they are able to fully live in that moment, in that space, and allow that energy to manifest without thought of, oh, this is embarrassing. Oh, this looks horrible. How's my hair? Am I pronouncing this right? All of that, right? And I know I have been so guilty of that during rituals, even for myself, where I'm by myself. There is no other person. But I am embarrassed that I stumbled over my words. And it's so silly. It's so silly because that is the opposite of what should be happening in ritual. If you stumble over your words, oh well. The words aren't necessarily the most important part because a good ritual, if you're chanting and you are continuously saying it, it's not necessarily a say it 3 times and we're all good. Maybe it's, maybe a small phrase. Saying that phrase over and over again until the words become inaudible and it's almost like you're humming and you're losing yourself to it and you may be swaying and you're just there in that moment and you're allowing that energy to flow. You're surrendering to it instead of holding up a structure of what you think should be there. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, yes. And truth be told, right? Like getting into like the flow, the swing of things. Yes, going ahead and just allowing it to be natural and just improvisation. I think is a good term, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have you? Of just going ahead and like say it is a particular sort of like musician, right? Like say a Frank Zappa who's has an extremely large ass discography with pretty much all the pieces or most of the pieces being improvisational, where he's just going ahead and it's more so naturalistic riffing. And he's like, "Hey, look, I know how to play the damn guitar and or have however many musicians in the session." And they're just going ahead and making whatever the hell they make, and it just feels smooth and natural, or it could be chaotic or whatever. But they're capturing that feeling, putting it on the recording, however it may in fact turn out. And lo and behold, he still has a large catalog that's still being released to this day, even after his death last century. Or maybe it was earlier this century, but I can't recall. But in any case, you know, he just went with the flow. And because of that, he's one of the greatest musicians that has ever lived in progressive rock and all that sort of thing. But he just let it flow. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not really gonna go ahead and be too concerned or hung up on like oh, I must go ahead and have a particularly written out piece. I must go ahead and, you know, make sure that I have however many movements within it." He just started riffing, just started playing, and all of that, as well as is such is the manner of many jazz musicians as well. You know, going ahead and just in a jam session, and whatever feels right in terms of improv, go ahead and do it. Same applies to like rappers going ahead freestyling off the top of the dome, what have you, whatever comes to mind. And also the same can be said for improv comedy of just whatever seems funny, go ahead and go with it. For those who are more so effective with it, it's funny and it lands. There can be some duds. Oh well, but it's just tapping into the naturalistic manner of things, and whatever happens, happens, and to the best of your ability, not being ashamed or embarrassed or having apprehensions about it, letting the floodgates go, and all of that.
Absolutely. And the great part is, it is as simple or as complicated as it feels necessary for you in any kind of ritual. So it can range from the whole altar setup and a bonfire, and there's 10 types of crystals, and a wand or whatever, and like a 20-step ritual that you're able to lose yourself in. If that's how much it takes to bypass your subconscious, go for it. Or it
Oh
can be
yes,
as
any
simple
term,
as
yes,
simple as lighting a candle.
or not even having any physical apparatus whatsoever.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's however much or however less you in fact need. I know for myself, I'm very much not needing any physical apparatus whatsoever, right? In terms of me doing what I do and all of that. Debbie has experienced it firsthand,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just going with it, like, not really I'm not using candles, I'm not using like wands, I'm not going ahead and walking around and doing like, ceremonial magic sort of stuff. That's what particularly works for me. For other people, such is not the case. They more so need the formalistic sort of means and manners or the physical mediums. Go ahead and tap into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And aside from say ceremonial magic of going ahead and doing an LBRP or an LIRP or the middle pillar or the Kabbalistic cross or the Shem operation or so on and so forth, right? And uh, to give some more Western examples, but more so within the manner of formalized religion, those of you who have gone to a Catholic mass and or a Christian mass of a different variety, or some sort of service, what have you, right? That is by all means a ritual, right? You're
Absolutely.
both. It's all spiritual. It's all going ahead and using different implements, having a procedural process, putting yourself into that mindset, putting yourself into that state, or at least attempting to do so. Depending on how engaged you are and what have you, but attempting to go ahead and put you in that space, like what, we're coming here on Sunday or whatever day you got it, and all that other shit that's going on, put that to the side. Now it's time to go ahead and tap into our spirituality of whether you're just doing self reflection generally, or you're giving thanks up to, the Abrahamic God of Yahweh or whichever names you deem appropriate, Jehovah, what have you, or Jesus Christ. Going ahead and giving reverence to Mother Mary, saints, angels, so on, right? If you're doing that, whatever the case may be, even something like that. Or, you could even say, in a sense of, I guess, while there is the esoteric influence in Catholic Mass, a more so direct sort of manners, like even Mormons, right? Granted, they're usually lumped in with Christians, but they have their own particular flavor. But they in of themselves, their particular manner of ritual, what have you, and all that. It's based on esoteric Hermeticism as well as Freemasonry and all that. Because lo and behold, for those who didn't know, Joseph Smith, he's in fact a Hermeticist and also associated with Freemasons. So that sort of sense is even in that particular belief system, right? And these are just some more so formalized manners of all right, you're doing these things already if you've experienced those sort of things. But even if it's not, right? I mean, just look at, say public education, right? At least more so when I was going to school, in the sense of like you're going ahead and you're doing rituals there of like, in the morning, you know, Pledge of Allegiance, right? And then you go ahead and sit down at your desk and you do whatever the class is meant to do based on what the teachers program and what they want to get done in the day is, right? But I think you get the point of just following those patterns and having a particular meaning for it and
Hmm.
all of that, whether it be from divine or just normal sort of circumstances. But that's like, I also want to go ahead and highlight not just like, all right, you know what, this sort of formalized manner, but in terms of the eccentric, right? So we've already touched on letting go, what have you, and in the sense, you know, um, this kind of can play into it as well, of just like more so natural flowing, letting it go. But I want to go ahead and talk about like being more so eccentric and or outside of yourself or outside of your conscious mind to tap more so into the naturalistic manner of things, and that is this particular term of LARPing, um, and how that ties into this, right?
Hmm.
And for those who are familiar with the term LARPing, right, you're probably gonna be like, "Oh, you're talking about LARPers?" Well, you're talking about those people who are fake and doing magic or fake and what the heck they're doing and all sort of thing. They know it's fake and all that, but in a sense, right? Like while there are people who are disingenuous or they're faking, they don't necessarily believe in what they're doing. It is LARPing tied in with faith, tied in with belief, tied in with intent. That goes ahead and gives power and credence to whatever sort of magical working that you're doing in that sort of sense of the letting go, what have you, bypassing that conscious mind, whether it's a formalized manner of things or it's more so raw, rugged, primitive, whatever. LARPing in of itself, right?
Hmm.
The pageantry of it, or just the being eccentric, playing a character that is not necessarily titled Devi or Twisted or whatever name or you happen to have or whatever online handle you happen to utilize, or whatever the case may be, stepping into another role as opposed to the one you usually identify with when you wake up every day. That in of itself goes ahead and allows you to tap into that as well.
Absolutely.
So,
I actually,
yes,
you know what? Let me take the
go
mic
ahead.
back for a second. So with LARPing or actually trying to embody, right? Whenever you are starting out, honestly, I think everyone needs to go to that extreme initially. I know it sounds silly, but hear me out. When you go to that extreme and you are LARPing in a sense, where you are trying to embody this in your entire being, and maybe it feels a little foreign, you haven't necessarily gotten to the surrender yet, right? Going over the top, giving too much in a sense, and I want to put that in quotations. Mind you, I actually did the fingers thing, but giving too much allows you to surrender to it because you're going above and beyond and more extreme than maybe you need to. Not necessarily in like the extreme in like a negative sense, obviously, but like you're given everything you've got because you're learning it. You're having to forge a new path in your mind. You're having to literally like machete through the wilderness of your brain to get to that subconscious. So you have to give so much more effort because it's new. It's brand freaking new. And everything with it. Yes, it may feel like an act initially. Yes, it may feel like, I don't know, this feels weird. It's supposed to because it's different. Because it's not the normal way that us in the West operate. Sure, some, like, it may look really strange, like putting on a mask, literally costuming, going to the extremes, right? But think about it this way: when you put on that mask and you're allowing yourself to let go and becoming what that mask symbolizes to you and actually acting accordingly, that is speaking more to your intentions in the ritual than anything ever could. So, forging those new pathways is absolutely necessary. And then, as you're getting comfortable and losing yourself and surrendering to it, that's when it's like, hey, I don't need to do so much because it's already there. I've got this. Now, of course, even those that have done this for years and years and years, sometimes we need to dive headfirst into the entirety of the pageantry. The whole thing. Getting up and hooting and hollering and just letting go. Because sometimes the path gets a little overgrown because we haven't traversed it as much as necessary. And so we got to chop some things back. We need to weed the garden a little bit. But that path is always accessible in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yep. And you know what? Like, in terms of like just LARPing and going ahead and allowing that as a means to just like, going into a different sort of role, putting yourself in a different sort of headspace, right? And all of that sort of thing, right? Like, you know, I'll go ahead and say that like one example of that, right? Where you can go ahead and just tap in to it and you take on other sort of role playing, right? Is like I guess you can say I've never done it myself, but in terms of like observation, like more so of a verbal D&D game, I guess, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and taking on that character and building it, right? And creating that persona from the ground up and more so of a, like, just that improvisational manner, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing where the story takes you, seeing how it unfolds, crafting that sort of thing and whatever insights you gain from it, you know, and that is while it is, the intent and purpose is, for a fact that you're going in there and you are making, this character as not who you identify with, right? Truth be told, like you may be going ahead and making something that is more so you in terms of who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and all that sort of thing. That this may be more so who you are on the core of the inside and what have you than it actually is otherwise. But one thing I did want to go ahead and say about LARPing is aside from us going ahead and like putting it into its context and describing meaning for the actual traditional like LARPing and stuff. For those who are unaware, go check out the movie Role Models, where it's pretty much Paul Rudd and I forget the name of the other guy who goes ahead and stars in it. One moment, I'll go ahead and actually find it. But yeah, based on her going ahead and laughing, it's a pretty funny comedy movie, and the whole general point of the film is that Paul Rudd and um Sean William Scott, there we go, the actors names, they're going ahead and they're acting as like in a Big Brother program for a couple kids, and one of them happens to be into LARPing, and pretty much like what that is, like I mentioned D&D in terms of having like an improvisational sort of thing, was actually going ahead and wearing capes and making like foam swords and like going ahead and living out that sort of medieval fantasy sort of like D&D sort of experience and all of that, and just going ahead and acting pretty like silly in a sense, or going ahead and like having that sort of like uh, persona that you put on, what have you. And in that movie, right, the one kid who happens to be part of it, he plays McLovin in Superbad. I forget, I don't know his actual name as an actor, but
He will always be
he go.
McLovin. That is just his name from now on.
Oh
That's
yes,
just
yes.
how he is.
Oh yes. But like he happens to find who he truly is more so by participating in the LARPing and having the encouragement by the end of the film of both of his big brother mentors and all of that. And granted, all of them as well, because comedy movie and more so like, all right, let's have a feel good, happy ending. But
I mean, always.
that is just a good cinematic example of that sort of thing right there.
Yeah. Although I will state as an aside, I have actually been to one where I witnessed people doing
An
this.
actual
An
LARP session.
actual LARP.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, that was wow.
Aside from giving positives, how cringe was it?
Wow. Um no, it allowed people to express themselves in a more genuine way than they ever could in the society that we have right now, which I respect like hell, but at the same time I was sitting there going, "Oh wow. Oh wow." But then again, I was like 18 years old. I didn't know what to do and I was just sitting there observing, just
Yes, as a
observing,
witness.
just
Yes.
witnessing. It was amazing.
Oh, yes. So, lo and behold, like whether it's with a silly or goofy and or just like fun recreational intention, or whether it's like a pointed, more so, what, I want to go ahead and accomplish this spiritual sort of thing, what have you, or anywhere in between. You know, you can go ahead and bypass that conscious mind, that ego, and all of that, the persona that you put on a day-to-day basis. That's ascribed to that name on your birth certificate or whatever particular online handle you may have or what have you, and tap in more so to the core of who you are.
Mhm.
And you can become able to know thyself better, as the Oracle of Delphi has quoted, and also that Devi herself has addressed through these series of monologues and conversations for the open sorcery beforehand. That come to know thyself and who you are, more so in touch with whatever makes you particularly unique and distinctive,
Mhm.
and then being able to find out what the heck it is you're here on this planet for, and be able to know your strengths, weaknesses, and how to move forward. And when everything may seem confusing or just not working, and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually want to kind of touch on other ways to bypass that egoic structure, that shame structure, that you have to behave in a certain way structure, and this is going to change us, so I don't want to change. That internal stubborn filter that just doesn't like to turn off. What are other ways of bypassing that? First one, we got the LARPing, right? The LARPing, it seems over the top, but like I said, you have to go over the top to forge the path. Another one, and I think we've touched on it in another video, is sex. It's sex, it's orgasms. It is literally the physical act of releasing.
Yes, primal urges, carnal urges.
Yep. There is no other place that you are going to be more honest and more vulnerable ever.
Well, granted, that is if you're going ahead and actually giving in and surrendering in that sort of sense. Not necessarily surrendering in terms of like, oh, I'm a sub in relation to a dom, but just more so like tapping into who you are and going with the flow of things. But
Hmm.
not gonna lie, not everybody necessarily goes ahead and does that. You know, they don't allow themselves to do that, but that should be the ultimate goal, the ultimate objective,
Yeah,
and that comes along with finding the right partner or partners, plural, if that's more so you being polyamorous and or whatever the heck, your particular manner and means of expressing oneself or who you feel more so natural of expressing yourself to. But yes, that should be the goal and the aim.
absolutely. And of course, like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, the first time with this partner, you're going to completely be able to just lose yourself in the experience and be good. No, that comes with practice, that comes with experience, and that comes with comfortability. Literally. You have to have all of those things in order to achieve this. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to have a one night stand and go do sex magic. That doesn't necessarily work that way because there is a certain amount of self consciousness that comes with novelty. You know what I mean? So, in that, like, do what you do, but do it responsibly. And then, of
Yes,
course,
responsibly,
yes,
in
responsibly.
moderation.
Never. Um, but chanting is another one because if it's short enough or you've memorized it enough, it is words that you're able to say over and over and over and over again. And eventually it's going to start really just humming throughout your whole being. It really does as you just keep going. And even though the words may become slurred and no longer audible in a sense, it helps to bypass that filter. It may sound like you're drunk by the end of it, but chanting and doing it in a manner where it's rhythmic and you're able to lose yourself in it, that's a wonderful way to bypass. Um, I was talking earlier about dancing. Dancing is always a really good way because dancing is a true expression of not just energy and building energy, but creativity, right? And in that, losing yourself in that intention, allowing that thing to flow, allowing yourself to just surrender to what your body is going to do. And on the other side of that, singing. And I'm going to say singing, not necessarily, it can range from being in the church choir or everyone is singing the hymns, right? That is going to be bringing up the energy and pointing everybody's energy towards a certain spot, filling up the battery, or singing for yourself, singing for your intention, putting that energy towards it, and losing yourself in the song. It allows everything to flow very, very well. The last two, I would say, is more along the lines of if you have the path already created, these are ways to get there is meditation and prayer. And I know for me, meditation and prayer are pretty synonymous with one another, but there are a lot of people that differentiate the two.
Oh yes, yes, and I'm very much in line with like, hey, look, you know what, meditation, and prayer, they're pretty much the same damn thing, what have you. It's just more so semantics, and I agree with you on that, and everything else you stated on the list. Um, Honestly, I do not necessarily have anything else to add that comes to mind, even though there probably is other examples, but I think that goes ahead and covers, the gamut, or at least goes ahead and provides enough to work with for whoever is listening.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I that was the last that I had, to be honest with you. So,
Oh yes, yes.
from there, I think we have covered enough on ritual to give people a good idea of what it really means and how to let yourself actually go to that place during ritual. Um, self consciousness and shame has no space during ritual whatsoever. So if you're having to deal with that, I'm definitely going to say give 100% more, because that shame has to go away. There is no shame in ritual.
Oh
Um,
yes. And don't forget to LARP.
yes.
LARP. LARP in terms of tapping into more so of a genuine sense by going ahead and using. Okay, I know how to put it. Tapping into yourself in a genuine sense by going ahead and putting on a eccentric or exaggerated manner of yourself, what have you, or whatever character or aspect of yourself that may in fact be. And just to go ahead and provide another sort of example of that, just think of pro wrestlers, right?
Oh
The
God.
ones who are like, yeah, the ones that are the most popular, the ones that are the best, whether it be The Rock, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or just anybody else. If you happen to pay attention to that or not, they are going ahead and going to be versions of themselves, but cranked up to like not just like 10 or 11, but like 25, 50, 100 million, whatever the case may be. They're going to go ahead and be a larger than life version of themselves in some sense.
And larger than life is necessary in ritual. Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is.
Because if you're doing spiritual shit, you're pulling from larger than life, and the caveat on life is mundane, regular, putting into a box, sort of like conscious perspective of life, not necessarily life as in the whole of existence.
Fully agreed.
You, yes, you're grabbing it from divine, and you're going ahead and you're bringing it downward, what have you.
All right.
But yes,
We spin?
remember the LARP.
Yes, very much LARP. LARP like your life depends on it.
Yes.
All right. But this has been Devi and Twisted
Yep.
on the Open Resorcery, and we will catch you guys next time.
Stay frosty, Neguses. Peace.